AI models are generally overconfident due to being trained on a limited dataset and being restricted to the choices that we make for them. This is especially dangerous in safety-critical applications, where a very promising application lies in the medical field. For example, in the early stage detection of cancer. As an example here, you can see the MRI scan of a person's brain, where a typical AI prediction could look like this. So the model would predict the person to be healthy with a probability of 99%, hence being very confident in its prediction. The ground truth, however, might more look like this. So the person might still be healthy, but maybe with a probability of 60%. And we would have a more fine-grained distribution over different tumor types, possibly. Knowledge that the model isn't even aware of. So, in general, we want our models to be aware of their own uncertainties. And in order to do this, we typically distinguish between two different types of uncertainties, called aleatoric and epistemic uncertainty. Where aleatoric uncertainty is uncertainty that we cannot reduce by collecting more data, and is due to the inherent randomness within it. And epistemic uncertainty can in principle be reduced, and is due to a lack of knowledge of ourselves or our models. Our models already predict a form of aleatoric uncertainty, but the question of how to predict epistemic uncertainty is a difficult one. And until now, there's no consensus about what a valid representation of epistemic uncertainty is. There are different methods being used. One is the so-called set-based representation, where we take the disagreement between different probabilistic predictions as a measure of epistemic uncertainty. Another one is the so-called distribution-based representation, where we look at, for example, Bayesian neural networks and put a prior distribution over our weights and then perform Bayesian inference. Another method that recently gained popularity and also falls into this category is so-called evidential deep learning, where we estimate the uncertainty by training a single neural network. As an example, here you can see for a standard classifier, given an input x, our model outputs us the probability for class 1, called theta. The evidential classifier, however, doesn't output class probabilities, but a distribution over these, called m. Going back to our example from the beginning, we can see that with the first model, we predict the probability that the person has cancer or not, whereas with the second model, we predict a distribution over these, also called second-order distribution. And by analyzing the variance of this distribution, we would get a measure of epistemic uncertainty. This sounds great, because we just have to train one single neural network, and not hundreds of different ensemble models or doing computationally costly Bayesian inference. But does this really work? Well, debatable, or not really. And to analyze this further, we have to ask ourselves what we want the second-order distribution to represent. In general, we wanted to represent the uncertainty of the first-order parameters. But from a more logical side, we can also establish certain criteria that we wanted to fulfill. For example, we wanted to convert to a Dirac delta distribution if we increase our sample size to infinity, hence to in case of absolute certainty and no epistemic uncertainty at all. Furthermore, we would like to have some form of monotonicity, so decreasing uncertainty with increasing sample size. In our latest work, we developed the concept of a reference distribution that can help us to evaluate common methods of uncertainty quantification. Frankly speaking, it is the distribution that we would get if we would resample from the underlying data generating distribution infinitely often. As an example, here you can see the confidence bounds of the reference distribution for the simple case of binary classification, where the true class probability follows this green sine curve. And we see that for increasing sample size, the confidence bounds become narrower. Hence, we decrease in our uncertainty. We found that for evidential deep learning methods, those criteria are generally not fulfilled. Depending on the optimization method that we use, we either end up with overconfident distributions, so Dirac delta distributions independent of the sample size, or arbitrary representations of epistemic uncertainty. Since this method is used a lot in practice, it is crucial to be aware of its limitations. And in general, it is important to evaluate different uncertainty quantification methods before using them. Our use case lies in the field of single-cell technology, where my colleague Lauren analyzed both aleatoric and epistemic uncertainty in the field of single cell type annotation. So if you're interested in that, make sure to check out her poster. In summary, we can say that common evidential deep learning methods do not provide a faithful representation of epistemic uncertainty, and it is important to be aware of that when using it. Since in the end we want to have faithful distributions, we need more work on quantitatively evaluating common methods, and a reference distribution can help us to do so. Furthermore, an interesting research direction lies in the field of analyzing possible proper second-order loss functions in the context of evidential deep learning. If you're interested in uncertainty, I also recommend to go to my supervisor Willem Bargemann's tutorial later in the day. Thank you.